After 50 days,
That's all.
assuming the stock stays right there at the current, stays at the money, it's going to be trading for about 7.
Which it won't, but we're isolating
Right,
one.
of course. Yeah, you're isolating everything. This is just the square root pricing rule in effect. But now the question is, what's the average decay?
Oh, that's kind of easy.
It's kind of easy. We got $10 divided by 100 days.
100 days. There you go.
So the average decay would be 10 cents per day.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people who are brand new would certainly think that an option would decay in what's called a linear fashion. It would just be in a straight line. But that's not how they decay. You can see in the red curve, it's relatively flat compared to the average, and then it gets relatively steep compared to the average. So that tells us there has to be a point where they're equal. So take a look at this. If we look at a point in time and another, whether it's a day or two later, we'd see the decay rate for the blue line would be 10 cents. Why? That's always the number for the average decay. But the red line would be, let's say, 5 cents up here. It's decaying at half the rate of average.
Half the rate of average, yeah.
So if we come up to maybe towards the center, look at a couple of points in time very close, we might see that the blue, of course, would be 10 cents, but now it's starting to accelerate a little bit. Maybe it's 7 cents up here.
Not even average yet.
Not even average yet, right. But we are at least decreasing faster than where we started.
So here's a thing for everybody to think about as you're going through this. Think ahead, right? This is what I teach my clients. Think ahead, think ahead, think ahead. As Bill's doing this and he's going at, how can I say, like you're going kind of down in time, right? You're going out in time and the time is decreasing.
Yep.
Well, what's the next one going to look like before he does it? Just think about that, stop the video and think about it. What's the next one going to look like? And what would these curves look like if it were not an at the money, if it were an out of the money, or even in the money? So go ahead.
So let's come up here to, let's say, 25 days. And if we did that, the blue curve would be, of course, 10 cents. But the red curve, look at that, would also be the same.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that they're going to be equal? The decay?
At a very, very small point in time, yes.
It's going to be equal to the average 3/4 of the way through?
We're going to talk about that. That's a good observation. Yep, it's going to take a long way for that to happen. And if we come out to this end of the curve, now our blue curve is going to be 10 cents, but the red might be 15 cents. Now it's decaying much faster than average. So the question that we started out asking, at what point does it decay? Is the decay rate equal to the average? And it turns out that one way we can visualize it, for all the people who know calculus, we can take this average decay and kind of slide it out this way. And right where they touch would be at the 25% mark. And so the way to visualize it, let's say these are snow ski mountain. We're looking at the side of a mountain. We have our red skier here and we have our blue skier. You can see that the blue skier is much faster, right? He's on a steeper slope. That's really all we're talking about when we mean this slope. So the option, the average rate of decay will be faster than the red. And that's what we saw. But as they move down this way, what happens? There's a point where they're equal. And then there's a point after where the blue is actually slower. You can see the red guy's going off a cliff here. So there is a point, and it turns out to be right when 25% of the time remains that you're going to lose 50%. And so look at that. We can see, because the average rate of decay when we hit this is going to be 10 cents per day.
And again, as usual, guys, look, guys and ladies, and I always do that. I'd never be gender specific, right? Traders, it's never going to be absolutely 25%. Sometimes it will be. It's in and around there. It's the general idea. It's the general idea of it's not half.
From a pricing model perspective, it is, though. It will come out because that's that square root pricing rule. And one of the ways we can show it is the square root of a quarter is a half.
But that's also, like, again, that's also assuming that everything is equal, which is, of course, never going to be in real life, which is where you get these variances from.
Of course.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is that if 25% of the time remains, half of the option's value remains. And so we can see it here. We started off at 10, we're at 5. Now for at the money options, there's a couple other characteristics. The first 50% of the time, so we're going from 100 days to 50 days, you're going to lose 30% of that option's value. Again, assuming it's at the money. The next 25% of the time, so the next 25 days, you're going to lose 20%.
And that's your half that he just talked about.
And then if we go to the final 25% of the time, so inside this 25-day mark, you're going to lose another 25. So take a look. I'm sorry, the final 25% of the time, you're going to lose another 50.
Right.
So look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's amazing. So if we add these first two together, the green and the yellow, that's 50%. So the first 75% of the time, you're going to lose half of the value. But in the last 25% of the time, you will also lose half your value. So it's this characteristic that makes a lot of people say, if you're selling an at the money option, especially wherever it is, we'd like to get within 50%. Because, I'm sorry, 25%, because you're going to decay absolutely as much as you did in the first 75%.
There's probably a bunch of people out there, Bill, that do credit spreads, right? Out of the money, put spreads out of the money. You can do iron condors, maybe even.
Right.
I will just look at that, iron condors. And, have any of you who've done that actually stopped to think about, well, if it's a 10-day outlook, middle of the week into the following week's expiration, if you got a 10-day outlook, why is it that like 4 days in, you can pick up more than half of the, you can pick up more than half.
Oh, yeah. That's the whole, that's right. The whole trade.
Why is that? You're ahead of that decay curve. That's the whole average thing, right? You're ahead of that. Right. And that's all right. I think I'm probably going way before I should be here. Right?
That's okay. I think we're going to be touching on that. So that's the main thing to see, is that for an at the money option, it pays to try to hold it as late as possible, right? We want to get into this window so that, if you've been holding it out here, maybe you worked, let's call it, really hard to go for the first 75 days or the first 75% of the time to collect half of that premium. You're going to do exactly the same amount of work in 1/3 that time.
But remember, you still have that very, very same obligation.
Yes.
And this is an at the money option. So you
right.
You are still signed up to deliver the stock at the level at which it's trading.
Right.
For a dollar amount.
Yep.
Okay.
So anyway, keep this in mind. So this is where a lot of people make their mistakes, because they see this with the at the monies and they assume this is always how it works. We're going to find out that's not true. But first, again, quick reminder, marketrebellion.com/get started for some great tips and videos to help you with your options trading. So now let's turn the corner here and talk about time decay for out of the monies. Okay, as we said, it's going to be different, and that's what a lot of people fail to recognize. So let's put 100 days to expiration, 20% volatility, 1% interest, and I've got a 115 call priced at 50 cents. Now, if we put this, again, this is from a pricing model. So if we put this on a graph, look at that, though.
And Bill, where's the stock on this?
I think the stock was 100. It's a 115 strike. It's just out of the money. But the point to see is that this curve is now pushed in. See, when we did the at the monies, it looked like this. And again, everybody assumes that time decay looks like this.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, you got to wait until you get into this range to start going off the cliff. That's for at the money. It is not for out of the money or for in the money. So let's take a look at how the numbers line up here. If we go to the halfway point, we saw that we would lose about 30%. That's why we got from 10 to 7 in that first example.
On the at the monies, everyone.
On the at the monies, right. But look at this down here, Stu. That thing went from up here down to here in 50 days. It lost 80% of its value.
Oh, hold on. I'm looking for my roll button. Where is it?
Exactly.
Right. Who's going to hold on to that option even at 50% of the time remaining when they've lost so much of the extrinsic value, right? The option did exactly what it was supposed to do. There's no money left.
There's no money left. And so what you would be better off doing is to close this one, or in the business we call it rolling, be a simultaneous trade where you would close this and sell a new one 100 days out.
Yeah.
And then you would buy it back with 50 days. So in both cases, you've held the option for 100 days.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just using that as for a reference point. So we have a nice scale of 100. But what most people would do is if they're holding here, look at how flat that red curve is. You're going to be waiting forever for no money.
Yeah. Here's another way to kind of say that, right? So halfway through, the number's down there, and you roll it and you do it again.
That's
so
right.
At the end of the same 100 days, or let's go back. The first option, if you hold on to it, you're waiting to collect some amount of money. In this case, I think it's 10 cents, right? So if you're waiting to collect 10 cents and it's going to cost you X amount of days, I guess it's 50 days here. Well, what Bill's saying is sell another one and you'll actually collect more than
far more
the 10 cents. And at the end of the whole thing, it's the same 100 days, but you've collected more money.
Right. Well, look at what we've done here. We've gone roughly from 50 cents to 10 cents. So we picked up 40 cents.
40
you
cents.
double that, that's 80 cents, which is better than 50 cents had you waited.
Yeah.
Now, there's another problem here, too. Just the absolute dollar value.
There isn't any.
Exactly. We're so close to zero. You have to say, why would you? I mean, forgetting about whether you're in, at, or out of the money, it's only 10 cents. And yet we see a lot of people that will do this.
Yeah.
And say, let me continue to hold it so I can bleed out that last bit of theta.
Let me ride it to expiration. I want them to go out worthless, so I can tell my buddies I were, a 9%
soaked up 100%.
I mean, there's no money in it.
There's no money.
Here's a tip, everyone. Look at your position. Look at it today, not where it came from, but look at it today. Would you put it on? Would you hold?
Right.
Would you be sure?
Yeah, good test.
20-cent option today. Would you put it on?
No way.
I think most of the time you're going to say no.
Of course, you should.
You have it. It's the same thing. You have it. So, and if you decide to keep it, it's like putting it on today.
That's right.
Which is it? Make your mind up. Be the risk manager.
If you wouldn't put the trade on today for 10 cents, it doesn't make any sense to hold it for 10 cents. Why? Because you can close it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can see that you would be better off to have closed it at the halfway point, and that's roughly where it will be for the out of the monies, and then resell it and write it twice. So that just becomes a huge, huge plus. But we see this a lot when people are doing, especially with covered calls. So, I mean, look at that. That's 80% of it in the first 50%.
Did we just give away like this giant, enormous tip?
It's a very good tip. We find this all the time. Most people have never even heard of this.
This is unbelievable. There's so many ramifications to this.
Yep. So as a general rule, option sellers should consider closing out of the money options at the halfway point and writing a new option.
Yeah.
And you'll end up holding the position for the same amount of time, but you'll collect far more money. And as an added bonus, you'll also have better downside hedges.
Because you now have replenished the money that you took
right.
in with new money that is now higher. Come on.
Right. And that previous screen, if trader A holds 10 cents going forward, he has a 10-cent downside hedge. Doesn't matter where he sold it.
Doesn't matter.
Going forward is 10 cents that will hedge you. If you roll it, it's now replenished back up to 50 cents.
Yeah, there you go. Which one would you rather have?
What would you rather have? Yeah, better downside hedges, and you collect far more money. Now, you might think, hey, isn't that getting something for nothing? In a way it is, but the misperception is because you're misinterpreting the way the time decay graphs work. You're assuming it's an at the money option, and that's really where the fallacy is. It's not.
Let me mention this as well. Sometimes, in low vol stocks, you might have a position where you sold the option and it either became or is still an at the money option.
Yep.
And that dollar amount may still be very low. And you may still be looking at that at the money curve to collect all of that money on the last 25 or 20% of the curve, but there's no money, right? You got to keep that in mind. Even if
right.
it's an out of the money option where the curve is steepest, there still has to be money there to collect.
That's right.
A significant amount of money,
Right.
which is kind of a subjective term, but then again, it's all relative to the movement. You have to remember that. You got to look at the dollar amount and you got to say, like, what am I doing? You know, is it worth having the obligation for this dollar amount? Even though I'm at the money and I'm on the steepest part of the curve. And many times the answer is going to be no.
And to add to that, sometimes people will say, well, I just sold it for 10 cents, so I should hold. Well, you shouldn't have even sold that option. That's right. So forget about writing in. And that was a mistake back on the sale date.
That's just trying to justify a moronic thing.
Right. So anyway, we see all of that all the time in different angles. And so we thought we could at least share that with our group. But one of the things, because again, it does get tricky. It does depend. You might be slightly out of the money, and that doesn't mean you're going to lose 80% at the halfway point. So what's the best way to check? Check with your pricing models.
Yeah, just run through them.
Just run through them, and you'll see where those points are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the main thing to take from this little takeaway, if you're not making the most of time decay, you're not making the most of your money. And if you're here to make the most of your money, these are some of the things you absolutely have to understand, and many of the things that we teach here at Market Rebellion. So if this is new to you or seems puzzling, give us a call. Check us out, marketrebellion.com. You can even sign up with Stu or Scotty. Hopefully we'll have Scotty on next week. But anyway, these are some of the things that we try to help people with. So now, if you haven't figured it out,
that people, that they don't read about, they never heard about, they're listening to somebody else who's talking about something that's completely wrong. Right? This is the real deal.
Absolutely. So if you haven't figured it out by now, here is our Chalk Talk question. You sold the 110 call. What's the clue there? It's out of the money for $2. You should hold the call to expiration to collect the most money. Now, of course, we have to assume all else equal, that it didn't fall to an at the money, but we're assuming that it's going to stay out of the money. So the answer here is absolutely false. You are, just by looking at that information, you're probably going to be better off closing it at the halfway point and rewriting it. So writing two of them at a half instead of one for the entire trip. But that catches people off guard. So hopefully it gives you some things to think about for any of you who like to do the covered calls or diagonal spreads.
Diagonal spreads. Yeah, this was great. This was absolutely a lot of information here. A ton of information. Usable information. Things that are just they get lost in the noise. People just it's not rocket science. It's not a secret. It's all there, but it's just things that people don't really think about.
Yeah,
and it doesn't allow them to be as good as a risk manager as they could be.
That's right. Too many times people find that they focus on what do you think the stock's going to do, but they're not focused on the strategic part of the trade.
Bill, ask me what I think NVIDIA is going to do tomorrow.
Yeah, what's NVIDIA going to do in the next? What's it going to do tomorrow?
No, I have no, what?
Or in the first 15 minutes of trading.
I have no idea.
We don't know. And that's not really even relevant. The question is
nothing to do with anything.
Based on the information that we know today and based on the option prices, what is most likely going to be your best trade? You have to look at the expected values, not just trying to create a crystal ball. So those might be some good future coaches corner. Talk a little bit more about
value. Absolutely.
Yep. We've touched on those before, but we hope that gives everybody out there some good things to think about. Yeah. And we appreciate you being here, and we will look for you next Thursday, same time on Coach's Corner. We'll see you then.
See ya.